Well, Molly, it's going to be a very quiet Freshers Week at the University of Liberia. Not a single one of thousands of applicants made the grade. Also, we will be speaking to a Tanzanian cyclist who's taking his education and conservation message global. And we also hear from some of the Nigerian filmmakers working in the country's massive movie industry. First up, 25,000 school leavers applied for admission to the state-run University of Liberia. Not a single one passed this year's entrance exam. It may be a grim reflection on how far the country's education system still has to go in recovering from the effects of a brutal civil war that ended just a decade ago. Nevertheless, the Liberian education minister says she finds it hard to believe that no one passed muster. Monia David Tape says she wants to see the result of the students' exams and plans on meeting with university officials to discuss just what went wrong. Dr. Momolu Getawe from the University of Monrovia says that he's unclear why so many fell short of the bar this year.
We really do not know exactly what went wrong, but it would seem that the students that we dealt with and which we have been dealing with have not come to reality with the educational standards that we set by the university. The exams were set the same way how our college examinations have been set through the years.
Well, it was concern about access to education in Africa that inspired our next guest to act on a pretty massive scale at that. Lelo Elvis Munis is from Tanzania. He and his trusty bike, Mamacita, are in Paris en route to Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, it's been 2 years since Lelo first set off from Chile on his round-the-world cycling trip to raise funds to send himself and 9 other would-be students to university to study environmental science. Now, he tells France 24 about what he's seen on his travels that worried him about youth education on his home continent.
I tried to go to university without success for about 4 years. And then I took on my bike and traveled in about 20 African countries. And I saw, at least I was already trying to train myself, but there was a place whereby there was no a lot of training or possibility of being trained. And these young people, they were not empowered to make any change to their communities. So I feel like it will be good to empower them with education. So if you're expecting them to change or transform their community into something movable, so at least it can reduce the level of the poverty and so forth.
But where do you think it's falling down? Are you talking about the system itself is not offering the opportunities to young people that you've come across? Or do you think young people themselves aren't, as we heard our last guest suggest, aren't pulling up their socks and reaching the standards that they need to gain access into further education?
Actually, I have a different view on that. I think for me that's the mode of education it's not really is not working because a lot of young people they'll try, but most of them they're starting something which is not viable to their environments. So a lot of the efforts we put in education and the mode of education in a place like Tanzania or the rest of Africa, it's not corresponding with these people. So the failure of education, probably we need to do some reforming and looking into it in a different perception rather than what we're trying to enforce. Yeah.
Now, you also, on your trips, are delivering lectures on both your concerns about education and on conservation. Why is this your speciality area?
It's because of the place I grown up. I grown up in the foothill of Kilimanjaro. There was a plenty of wildlife around, and the biodiversity is very high. Also, we live sustainably. So that was my specialty before I went to school. But unfortunately, in school I learned something different. They didn't teach me about my social economy and what is surrounding me. So I'm very concerning after traveling in Africa and see the crisis of environments which will influence on the human crisis. So environment, it's what inspired me to do this.
Lelo Elvis Munis there. And if you want to keep up with his progress, you can always check out his website. That's www.fromchile2kili.com. Look now at some other news. In Nigeria, suspected Boko Haram militants posed as soldiers to gain access to a vigilante group in the northeast before opening fire and killing at least 18 people in the town of Bama. Now, the jihadist fighters are also believed to be behind an attack on a guest house in the town of Damask in which at least 6 were killed. Officials believe the insurgents are launching revenge attacks on civilian groups, helping the army track down its members. Facing an ongoing political crisis, on Tuesday, Tunisia's Prime Minister said that he'd be willing to step aside for a caretaker cabinet to hold new elections, but not before a new constitution was drafted and an election plan settled. Ali Lariad also warned of the security challenge faced by the country. He claims the government has proof that the 2 liberal politicians whose assassination sparked the current unrest were killed by jihadist group Ansar al-Sharia. He also says that they were behind the recent killing of 8 soldiers and officially classified the movement as a terrorist organisation. 4 UN peacekeepers are missing in Sudan's Darfur region after having been swept away in floods. The group had reportedly been escorting an aid convoy when they were caught up in a powerful current. Heavy rains that started earlier this month have killed dozens, and humanitarian workers warn that the impact of the inundation continues to grow. It's thought over 500,000 people have been affected. French President François Hollande today addressed diplomats from across the globe who gathered at the Elysee for the annual Conference of Ambassadors. The circumstances of several African countries were addressed during his speech. That includes Mali, Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Africa. Hollande also called for more to be done internationally in tackling the growing humanitarian crisis in Central African Republic. The country was plunged into chaos following a rebel takeover in March.
Sadly, this country is looking more and more like Somalia. 60,000 children are at risk of dying from malnutrition, and some 1.5 million people have been displaced out of the 5 million who live in the Central African Republic. I therefore call on the African Union and the UN Security Council to take action to face this crisis, and France will help them.
Now, Nigeria's filmmaking industry is the second largest in the world behind India's. The sector boomed in the 90s and now generates around $250 million every year. It's also the second largest employer in the country. But Nigeria's shaky infrastructure and tense religious context makes producing films a tricky business.
On set with Tunde Kelani, the award-winning director has produced over 15 films in the last 20 years. His latest project, Dazzling Mirage, is one of about 1,000 movies set to be released this year in Nigeria. An impressive output despite the sometimes sketchy working conditions.
It's very difficult to make film with so much lack of infrastructure. You certainly couldn't make a film without electricity, and today it's almost impossible, to make a film without looking at new media and the internet. And that in Nigeria, we still don't have broadband internet in homes.
For Nigerian filmmakers, with the total budget averaging somewhere between $6,000 and $15,000, necessity is the mother of invention. Many rely on cheap digital equipment and release their work straight to tape and DVD. Yet thousands of bootleg copies are sold on the street, meaning producers miss out on much-needed revenue. In northern Nigeria, actors and directors also have to comply with a long list of restrictions imposed by local authorities, quick to invoke Sharia law to justify censorship.
Transparent clothes are not allowed, no singing and dancing. These are some of the conditions. There are many, there are about 29 of them, which make the film industry paralyze the film industry, and people rush away.
Nigerian producers are looking to woo foreign partners and get through to a wider audience. Local talents have already attracted funding from European film institutes, allowing the casting of big Hollywood names like Isaiah Washington and Tandy Newton. An encouraging sign the Nollywood star is on the rise.
Well, I know where I'm heading if things fall through here at France 24. But that does wrap up Africa News from me. I will be back tomorrow, though, with more Molly.
All right, Georja Calvin-Smith, thank you very much for that.
much.
And do stay tuned to France 24. We'll, of course, have more headlines coming up, including the possible military intervention in Syria. We'll also have a look at sports. Dan Levy will be here with the latest tennis action, and that and more, plus Focus. Do stay tuned to France 24.